The number that keeps circulating in industry conversations is staggering. Tens of millions of dollars. That is the scale of expectation attached to the Sussex partnership with Netflix. And right now, that expectation is colliding with reality in a very public way. What was once presented as a landmark entertainment alliance is now being quietly reassessed, project by project, moment by moment. At the center of the latest tension is a small independent film making its debut on the festival circuit. On paper, this should have been a low-risk creative experiment. In practice, it has become a pressure test for everything Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are trying to prove about their place in Hollywood. According to people familiar with how festivals operate behind the scenes, Sundance is not just about art, it is about leverage. It is where distributors decide what feels viable, what feels risky, and what feels radioactive. Every reaction is logged, every whisper matters. And in this case, the conversation is not just about the film itself, but about whether Meghan Markle's involvement helps or hinders its future. What makes this moment different from previous criticism is the financial exposure. This is not a symbolic appearance or a favor for a friend. By multiple accounts, the Sussexes have personal money tied to the project. That changes the stakes entirely. When your own capital is involved, perception stops being abstract. It becomes existential. Industry insiders describe a situation filled with quiet anxiety. Producers, agents, and potential distributors are not debating artistic merit alone. They are running calculations. Will audiences disengage because of controversy? Will platforms hesitate because of optics? Will marketing become harder instead of easier? One person close to the production summarized it bluntly. If any element of a film complicates sales, that element becomes optional. Hollywood is not sentimental, it is pragmatic. That reality is especially stark given how Meghan once framed her departure from royal life. The move was presented as a step toward creative freedom, professional autonomy, and long-term influence in entertainment. The implication was that constraints had been removed, that ambition could finally breathe. Yet, years later, as the contrast between promise and outcome has become difficult to ignore, instead of commanding projects, she appears in a brief, silent moment in an independent film. Instead of shaping narratives, she is waiting to see how audiences react to her presence. The irony is not lost on observers. A woman who walked away from one of the most visible institutions in the world to pursue a Hollywood future is now facing questions about whether her involvement is commercially viable. This tension is compounded by recent performance data from streaming. Meghan's lifestyle series was intended to reposition her image. Warmer, more approachable, less confrontational. It was designed to rebuild goodwill and broaden appeal. Yet, internal metrics reportedly fell far short of expectations, particularly given the promotional resources behind it. In the streaming world, numbers are unforgiving. Platforms can frame launches positively in press releases, but internally, success is measured by completion rates, rewatch value, and audience retention. When those metrics disappoint, patience wears thin. What makes this moment especially precarious is timing. The film's festival exposure arrives alongside a growing perception that multiple Sussex ventures are struggling simultaneously. Podcasting ambitions stalled, streaming projects underperformed, brand experiments failed to gain traction. Viewed individually, any one of these could be dismissed as a learning curve. Viewed together, they resemble a pattern. Several executives have spoken, off the record, about early optimism surrounding the couple. There was genuine interest in what a modern royal narrative could bring to entertainment, but that goodwill has reportedly eroded, replaced with caution. The most common critique is not hostility, but distrust. Projects are perceived as overly brand-centric, more focused on image management than audience connection. In an industry that prizes authenticity, that perception is costly. What is particularly striking is how differently Meghan and Harry are now viewed within the same circles. According to multiple insiders, Harry remains a draw. His background, family context, and personal contradictions still intrigue audiences. He represents access to a story larger than himself. Meghan, by contrast, is increasingly seen as polarizing without being compensatory, controversy without conversion, attention without retention. This distinction matters because it shapes invitations, opportunities, and alliances. Hollywood does not operate on fairness, it operates on perceived value. The Sundance appearance, then, was less about celebration and more about assessment. Observers say the couple was closely monitoring reactions, not basking in them, watching press tone, watching audience chatter, watching industry response. Because if the reaction turns negative, the consequences are immediate. Editors can shorten scenes, marketers can de-emphasize involvement, distributors can request changes. None of this is unusual, it is standard risk mitigation. The uncomfortable truth is that even high-profile figures are replaceable when economics demand it. That truth becomes sharper when examining the nature of Meghan's role. Despite promotional framing suggesting a return to acting, her appearance is minimal, no dialogue, no character arc. Essentially, she appears as herself. For someone once positioned as a returning creative force, the gap between narrative and reality is stark. Timing adds another layer of complexity. The announcement of her involvement coincided with positive coverage of senior royals elsewhere, a pattern that commentators have noted before. Whether intentional or coincidental, the strategy appears increasingly transparent to audiences, and transparency cuts both ways. At the heart of the issue is a deeper problem that extends beyond any single project: credibility. Entertainment relies on trust. Trust that claims align with reality. Trust that partnerships will not generate unforeseen complications. Over time, small inconsistencies accumulate. Stories that cannot be verified, narratives that shift, details that feel rehearsed rather than recalled. Individually, they might not matter. Collectively, they erode confidence. This erosion has consequences. Executives become cautious, meetings become exploratory rather than enthusiastic, offers become conditional. The industry is not moralistic, but it is risk-averse. Observers point to repeated examples where presentation outpaced substance: lifestyle branding that failed to resonate, activism stories that raised questions, media moments that invited scrutiny rather than solidarity. Audiences today are sophisticated. They recognize curation, they detect performance, and when they sense manipulation, they disengage. The reception to recent projects suggests not outrage, but indifference. And indifference is far more dangerous. Social capital operates on mutual benefit. When a figure no longer delivers engagement, their networks thin, invitations slow, associations cool. There are signs this is already happening. High-profile events remain inaccessible, elite social circles appear distant, public alignment from celebrities has diminished. None of this is accidental. These are signals. The Sundance test, then, is not just about one film. It's about whether Meghan Markle still represents upside, whether her name attracts or repels, whether association adds value or introduces friction. If the answer trends negative, the implications extend far beyond this project. Hollywood is not cruel, but it is efficient. When patterns emerge, decisions follow. What makes this moment especially sobering is the contrast with Meghan's pre-royal career. She was a working actress with steady momentum. She had a digital platform that resonated. She was building incrementally. Royal association offered scale, but it also raised expectations. The assumption was that access would translate to impact. Instead, the trajectory appears inverted. Meanwhile, Prince Harry's relevance remains tethered to legacy rather than output. His identity is inherited, not constructed. That distinction protects him in ways Meghan does not share. As a result, industry insiders increasingly view the couple asymmetrically: Harry as narrative, Meghan as variable. The danger now is not one failure, but cumulative loss of confidence. At some point, even the most patient partners step back. If the film struggles commercially, if distributors hesitate, if edits quietly remove her presence, the message will be unmistakable. It would signal that the industry has reached a conclusion, not through scandal, but through calculus. And perhaps the most difficult aspect is that this outcome would not be driven by critics or tabloids, but by numbers. Metrics do not argue, they do not negotiate, they simply report. The remaining question is whether the Sussexes recognize the inflection point they are facing, whether adaptation is possible, whether recalibration is on the table, because the alternative is stagnation. Hollywood does not exile people dramatically, it simply stops calling. If that happens, no announcement will mark the end, no statement will confirm it, the silence will do the work. And silence in this industry is definitive.